Iran claims it put a ballistic missile directly into the underground command infrastructure beneath Israel's military headquarters in central Tel Aviv, the same compound where Netanyahu has been publicly photographed running this war from a bunker below the surface. Israel sealed the streets, blocked the cameras. The military issued no statement, and as of this morning, that strike site has not been independently verified by any journalist on the ground. That detail right there is the story, not the missile, the silence after it. Here's what we know. The IRGC, in a telegram statement released during what it described as the 10th wave of Operation True Promise 4, said its forces used Kheibar Shekan ballistic missiles to strike Netanyahu's office and the command location of the Israeli Air Force commander. The statement was carried across Iranian state media through Tasnim News and Fars news agency. Iran did not release satellite imagery. It did not release damage footage. The IRGC declared Netanyahu's condition, in its words, unclear. Within hours, Israeli media confirmed that Netanyahu had, in fact, met with his defense minister, the chief of staff, and the director of the Mossad in Tel Aviv. He was alive. His condition was not unclear. But here's the question that has not been answered since that strike. What exactly was hit? And why did Israel go completely silent about the damage to that specific location? That silence has a structure. And once you understand what sits beneath that compound, the silence stops looking like routine operational security. It starts looking like something else entirely. To understand this, you need to understand what is actually located under the Kirya district of central Tel Aviv. Most people following this war picture Israeli military headquarters as a reinforced surface compound with some basement shelters. That is not what is there. What is there is a layered underground architecture that took decades and hundreds of millions of dollars to construct, and that Israel has gone to significant lengths to keep off the map, literally. There are two installations that matter for this story. The first is designated Site 81. According to a 2013 U.S. Army Corps of Engineers document that has since been geolocated by researchers, Site 81 is an electromagnetically shielded underground intelligence facility spanning approximately 6,000 square meters. The U.S. funded it. American engineers built it. A final payment of over $758,000 to the American construction firm Oxford Federal for what contract documents describe as Phase 2 work on the site was processed on February 26, 2019. The facility was designed to remain operational even if electronic warfare systems targeted the surrounding area. It sits beneath what is now the Da Vinci apartment complex on Leonardo da Vinci Street in Tel Aviv, directly inside the Kirya security perimeter. The second installation is the one that received media attention in 2021 when the New York Times was given limited access. It is called the Fortress of Zion. According to Israel Hayom and the New York Times reports, it is a newer, deeper command post built directly beneath the IDF's main headquarters, replacing an older facility called the Pit, which had been operational since 1966. The Fortress of Zion took 10 years to design and build. It is protected from nuclear strikes. It contains its own power supply, food stores, water supply, a gym, a synagogue, a kitchen, sleeping quarters for the chief of staff, a private bedroom for the prime minister during wartime operations, offices for the defense and foreign ministers, and a dedicated suite for the heads of Mossad and Shin Bet. During routine operations, 300 to 400 soldiers work there continuously. During active wartime, that number rises to thousands. The nerve center itself holds approximately 70 people arrayed across multiple levels, all facing wall-mounted screens tracking live strike data in real time. This is not a backup command center. It is the primary wartime brain of Israel's military. And it is the exact location the IRGC said it targeted. Now here is where the timeline becomes important, because this is not the first time Iran has fired at this zone. And what happened the last time tells you something specific about what Israel is trying to prevent people from seeing now. On June 13, 2025, during the conflict that lasted 12 days, Iranian ballistic missiles struck the north tower of the Da Vinci apartment complex. Fox News correspondent Trey Yingst was on the ground near the Kirya compound that evening. He began broadcasting live from just north of the Kirya Bridge on Menachem Begin Road. Within seconds, Israeli police physically removed him from his position. He was not allowed to continue filming. He reported on air that something had been hit in the compound area. He was moved before he could document what. The missile had struck approximately 550 meters from his position, landing on the Da Vinci complex, the civilian-facing structure built directly above the underground intelligence facility Site 81. Israel sealed the entire area. The Jerusalem Post later described the impact zone as being, in the words of their report, a stone's throw from Netanyahu's office, which at the time was designated Building 22 inside the compound. Within weeks of that war ending, the Prime Minister's office began renovations. Israeli authorities have not confirmed or denied whether the building sustained structural damage. That question has never received an official answer. France 24 conducted an analysis of the Israeli media coverage of that strike and concluded it had been deliberately delayed. Haaretz waited 2 full weeks before publishing anything about the Da Vinci hit, despite photographs having already circulated online. And then there is the satellite data. Google Maps continues to blur the imagery over the Kirya district and the Da Vinci complex zone. Yandex, the Russian mapping service, does the same, blocking both satellite imagery and location metadata for the towers entirely. That censorship has not changed. As of this week, that section of Tel Aviv remains blurred, so the pattern entering the current war was already established. Iran had targeted this zone once, hit within striking distance of the most sensitive underground architecture in Israel. Israel sealed the area, blocked cameras, delayed media, and the satellite imagery remains dark. That is the context for what the IRGC claimed during the 10th wave of this current conflict. Now let us get into what has actually happened since this war began on February 28, 2026. The United States and Israel launched coordinated surprise strikes across multiple sites in Iran on the night of February 28th. Ali Khamenei, who had ruled Iran for 37 years, was killed in those initial strikes. Several of his family members, including his wife and one of his sisters, were also killed. The IRGC's senior command structure was simultaneously targeted. Multiple high-ranking commanders were killed in the opening hours. Iran's response began within hours. The IRGC named its campaign Operation True Promise 4 and began systematically targeting both Israeli territory and American bases across the region. On day 1 of the Iranian response, approximately 90 ballistic missiles were launched at Israel. Day 2 saw approximately 65. By day 4, around 20 to 25 per volley. The volume declined significantly over the first 2 weeks, which the United States attributed to joint U.S.-Israeli operations targeting Iranian mobile launchers inside Iran. By the 10th day of the war, U.S. officials stated that drone attacks from Iran had dropped approximately 95% and ballistic missile attacks approximately 90% from their initial levels. However, the character of what was still getting through had changed. The missiles getting past Israeli defenses were getting larger, carrying heavier warheads, and an increasing number were equipped with cluster munition payloads. By the 10th day of this conflict, Iran had launched a total of approximately 300 ballistic missiles at Israel. Nearly half of those carried cluster munition warheads. A cluster warhead does not work like a conventional ballistic payload. A conventional warhead requires accuracy to do damage. A cluster warhead opens at altitude, somewhere around 7 kilometers depending on the variant, and releases dozens of individual submunitions across a dispersal zone that can extend several kilometers in radius. In a densely built environment like the Tel Aviv metropolitan corridor, this transforms a single missile from a precision threat into an area saturation weapon. Each submunition typically carries between 2 and 3 kilograms of explosive. The effect on surface infrastructure, ventilation systems, external communications arrays, and any personnel caught above ground in the dispersal zone is not dependent on a direct hit. The Kheibar Shekan missile the IRGC said it used in the strike on Netanyahu's office, and the command zone is a solid-fuel ballistic missile with a confirmed range of approximately 1,450 kilometers. It carries a conventional warhead of several hundred kilograms in its standard configuration. It is not a cluster variant. It is a precision weapon designed to hit specific coordinates. The IRGC's claim was not of area saturation. It was of a targeted strike on a specific location. That is a different claim, and it is one that cannot be evaluated from open sources because Israel has not allowed access to the impact zone and no independent verification has been published. What can be evaluated is what happened in the surrounding engagements. On February 28th, a ballistic missile carrying a conventional warhead struck a building in Tel Aviv, killing 1 civilian woman and injuring 22 others. On March 1st, a missile strike hit a synagogue and residential buildings in Beit Shemesh, 18 miles from Jerusalem. 9 civilians were killed, 49 were injured, 2 interceptors were launched against that missile, and both missed. The missile was a direct hit on a communal underground shelter. Investigators later concluded that even a fully compliant reinforced shelter would not have survived the kinetic energy of a direct impact at that scale. On March 9th, 2 workers were killed in Yehud, east of Tel Aviv, by submunitions from a cluster warhead scattering across a construction site. By March 15th, Iranian missiles were still reaching Israeli territory in multiple daily barrages. 7 salvos were recorded on the night of March 15th into March 16th alone. Cluster munitions scattered across central Israel. A man in his 60s was moderately wounded when submunitions struck an apartment building in Bnei Brak. 4 people were wounded across multiple central Israel locations in that same wave. Now here's where the defensive picture becomes relevant to this story. Because the IRGC's ability to place a Kheibar Shekan missile anywhere near the Kirya zone depends on whether Israel's upper-tier air defenses are functioning at capacity. And on March 14th, the U.S. news outlet Semaphore reported, citing American officials familiar with the matter, that Israel had informed the United States it was running critically low on ballistic missile interceptors. The report said the United States had been aware of Israel's low stockpile capacity for months and described it as something that was expected and anticipated. Israel's military denied the report the same day. 3 Israeli officials told media they had sufficient interceptors across all system types and stated that production was running around the clock at facilities in both Israel and the United States. However, the Israeli government voted by phone the same night to approve an emergency transfer of approximately $826 million in additional funds to the Defense Ministry, specifically for what the government described as urgent and essential defense procurement. That funding authorization happened within hours of the denial. You can evaluate that sequence yourself. Israel's anti-ballistic missile architecture operates in 3 tiers. The Arrow 3 is the outermost layer, designed to intercept ballistic missiles while they are still outside the Earth's atmosphere. It is a hit-to-kill system. The Arrow 2 functions at a lower altitude, designed to detonate near an incoming missile rather than physically collide with it. David's Sling handles medium-range threats and drones. Iron Dome handles shorter-range rockets like those fired from Lebanon. In the June 2025 12-day war, the United States alone fired over 150 THAAD interceptors, which the Center for Strategic and International Studies assessed to be approximately a quarter of U.S. inventory at that time. The U.S. also reportedly used approximately $2.5 billion worth of Patriot interceptors in the first 5 days of the current conflict. Each interceptor costs millions of dollars. Each incoming ballistic missile costs a fraction of that to produce. In a prolonged exchange, measured in weeks, the economics of that imbalance matter structurally. Here's the part most coverage is not focusing on. The debate about whether Israel is running low on interceptors is real and contested, but it is actually secondary to a different question, the cluster munition problem. When Iran fires a missile equipped with a cluster warhead, the individual submunitions that scatter at low altitude are not ballistic targets. The Arrow systems are not designed to engage them. They are too small, too low, too numerous. Israel has been using Iron Dome and David's Sling to attempt intercepts of individual submunitions. That means a single incoming missile with a cluster payload is forcing multiple system responses across multiple tiers simultaneously. The Arrow engaging the carrier missile at high altitude. Shorter range systems trying to track dozens of individual submunitions at low altitude. Each individual engagement consumes interceptors. Each submunition that lands on a surface area where a communications array or a ventilation shaft for an underground facility is located does not need to penetrate concrete. It needs to damage the infrastructure that keeps what is beneath the concrete connected to the outside world. That is the structural logic behind why Iran is using cluster warheads near urban command infrastructure. It is not only about casualties. It is about degrading the surface layer above an underground command system without needing to physically penetrate it. And that is precisely the area where the IRGC claims it has been targeting. The leadership question running alongside all of this is not a footnote. It is central to whether Iran can sustain the operational coherence required to keep landing missiles in the specific zones it is claiming to target. On February 28th, the same night Khamenei was killed, the IRGC moved immediately to install a successor. Iran International reported that IRGC commanders began pressuring members of the Assembly of Experts that same night, bypassing the formal electoral process. By March 3rd, online sessions of the Assembly were underway. By March 9th, Mojtaba Khamenei, the 56-year-old second son of Ali Khamenei, was formally announced as Iran's third supreme leader. He has not appeared on camera since. Not once. His first public communication was a written statement read aloud by a state television anchor on March 12th, while a still photograph of Mojtaba was displayed on screen. 14 days into the war that killed his father, the man now nominally in command of that war has not been heard speaking, has not been seen moving, and has not confirmed his own physical presence anywhere. A source with knowledge of the situation told CNN that Mojtaba sustained a fractured foot, a bruised left eye, and minor lacerations to his face on the first day of the strikes that killed his father. Whether those injuries have affected his capacity to command is not confirmed. Iranian state media has been circulating AI-generated videos of him delivering speeches, videos that never happened. One analyst in Tehran told CNN they're calling him the AI supreme leader. The statement attributed to Mojtaba on March 12th, however, was substantively significant regardless of who actually composed it. He called for the continuation of missile strikes against Israel. He declared the Strait of Hormuz would remain closed. He demanded all American bases in the region be shut down or they would be targeted. He signaled the possibility of opening new fronts against adversaries in areas where, in his words, they have little experience and are highly vulnerable. He also threatened what he described as compensation through destruction of enemy assets. He said, in the statement read on his behalf, that if reparations for the war damage were refused, Iran would take or destroy assets equivalent to what it assessed it was owed. That is not diplomatic language. That is wartime escalation language with an economic dimension attached. According to Foreign Affairs, the Assembly of Experts chose Mojtaba not on merit, but out of necessity. The U.S.-Israeli operations in the opening strike had killed much of Iran's military and clerical leadership simultaneously. Mojtaba was described in a classified intelligence assessment that was reportedly briefed to President Trump as a man his own father viewed as not very bright and unfit to lead. Trump himself, in an interview with Fox News, publicly called Mojtaba a lightweight and described him as unacceptable. He said he needed to be involved in selecting Iran's leadership. Mojtaba's selection, according to Foreign Affairs analysis, was partly driven by the fact that Trump's stated desire to choose Iran's next leader had made Mojtaba the only option the regime could elevate without appearing to capitulate to American pressure. The man who was explicitly rejected by Washington became the choice precisely because Washington rejected him. The IRGC's influence over that selection process was not subtle. Iran International described repeated contacts and psychological and political pressure from IRGC commanders on assembly members in the days before the vote. What that means in practice is that the body nominally directing Iran's missile campaign from a command perspective is the IRGC, operating under the political cover of a supreme leader who has not been publicly seen, whose physical condition is unknown, whose voice has not been broadcast, and whose first statement to the nation was read aloud by someone else over a photograph. Whether the IRGC requires Mojtaba to actually command operations or simply to exist as a legitimizing figurehead is the question that determines the coherence of Iran's targeting operations going forward. And that coherence matters specifically for the bunker question. The Kheibar Shekan is a precision weapon. It is not a missile you fire at a general area and hope it lands near something. It has a guidance system. It has programmed coordinates. Someone made the decision to input the coordinates of the Kirya command zone as a target. Someone maintained the targeting intelligence required to select that specific location over any other target in Israel. That targeting decision requires functional command authority, functional intelligence architecture, and functional missile logistics. The fact that the IRGC has continued to execute waves of strikes against specific named targets across 3 weeks of sustained U.S. and Israeli bombardment of Iranian infrastructure suggests that functional targeting capacity has not collapsed. Whatever damage has been done to Iran's surface infrastructure, something below it is still directing missile operations with enough precision to make specific facility claims. Which brings us back to where this started. Israel has gone to extraordinary lengths to prevent independent verification of what happens when missiles land near the Kirya compound. It happened in June 2025. Cameras were blocked, media was delayed, streets were sealed, the satellite imagery remains dark. And it has happened again in this current wave. The IRGC made a specific targeting claim. Israel responded with silence on the specific damage question while confirming Netanyahu was alive and operational. That is not the same as confirming the facility was undamaged. Netanyahu himself, as of March 17th, was photographed inside the Air Force command bunker at the Kirya announcing the killing of 2 senior Iranian figures, Ali Larijani and the head of the Basij force. He was operational. He was underground. He was in the bunker. The fortress of Zion, whatever damage it may or may not have sustained, is still running this war. The question is whether the surface infrastructure above it, the communications nodes, the ventilation systems, the access corridors, the civilian-facing structures built over the most sensitive underground architecture in the country, whether any of that has been compromised in ways that Israel has decided the public will not see. The broader numbers as of March 17th, day 18 of the war. Over 1,300 confirmed Iranian civilian deaths, including at least 194 children, according to the human rights activists' news agency. Over 3.2 million Iranians displaced from their homes, according to the UN Refugee Agency. 12 Israelis killed. 7 American service members dead. More than 800,000 people displaced in Lebanon from Israeli strikes targeting Hezbollah. The carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, deployed in the Red Sea in operations against Iran, pulled from active operations after a fire broke out on board. The U.S. State Department ordered non-emergency government personnel and their families to depart multiple countries in the region. Bahrain's air defenses reported intercepting 125 missiles and over 200 drones since the war began. An oil tanker fire in Iraqi waters. Crude oil above $115 a barrel as Hormuz shipping volume continues to decline. The International Energy Agency authorized the release of 400 million barrels from strategic reserves, described as the largest such intervention in the agency's history. On March 17th, Netanyahu addressed the Iranian people directly from that command bunker, urging them to celebrate Chaharshanbe Suri, Iran's fire festival, which the Islamic Republic has historically suppressed as a pagan tradition. He said Iranian aircraft were hitting operatives in the crossroads, in the city squares. He told Iranians he was watching from above. He said, "Happy Nowruz." That is the public face of this war on the Israeli side. A prime minister broadcasting from an underground bunker to the population of the country whose missiles have been landing within several hundred meters of where he is sitting. That is the contradiction at the center of this story. Both governments are conducting the same operation. Iran is hunting Israeli command infrastructure. Israel is hunting Iranian command infrastructure. On March 6th, Israeli Air Force jets destroyed the underground bunker of Ali Khamenei beneath the leadership compound in Tehran. The IDF published footage. The destruction was explicit. The facility extended beneath multiple city blocks and contained command chambers used by Iran's senior leadership. That strike was visible and confirmed. The mirror operation, Iranian missiles targeting the Kirya zone, is invisible because Israel controls the access. One side showed its hand. The other sealed the evidence and went silent. What does not have a clear answer yet, whether the IRGC's claim of a strike on the command infrastructure was physically accurate in terms of proximity and damage, whether Israel's interceptor situation is genuinely stable, or whether the emergency funding authorization the night of March 14th reflected something the public denial was not capturing, whether Mojtaba Khamenei is personally directing targeting operations, or whether the IRGC is operating with effective autonomy under his political cover, whether the Strait of Hormuz disruption, now entering its third week, produces economic pressure on any of the parties sufficient to alter the military calculus before Israeli or American operations achieve their stated objective of degrading Iran's nuclear and missile programs to the point of irreversibility. And what Mojtaba Khamenei meant when he said in that written statement read over his photograph that studies had been conducted regarding the opening of additional fronts in areas where the enemy has little experience and is highly vulnerable. That phrase has not been adequately examined. He did not specify geography. He specified vulnerability and lack of experience. The IRGC's doctrine of asymmetric pressure has historically involved activating networks and proxy capabilities in locations and through methods that bypass the conventional military contest entirely. The Houthis in Yemen are still launching. Hezbollah has been firing from Lebanon since March 3rd. Iraqi groups have joined the strike campaign with their own drone and missile operations. The network is not contracting. It is being asked to absorb the load that Iran's depleted ballistic missile forces are no longer carrying at the opening day volume. The war that started on February 28th has not defined what its own ending looks like. Israel has not stated what military objective, once achieved, ends the strikes on Iran. The United States said 4 to 6 weeks at the outset. Those weeks are passing. Iran's new leader is unseen. His first message delivered by proxy, his health unconfirmed, his command authority distributed across a Revolutionary Guard structure that was already designed to operate without centralized leadership. The bunker beneath Tel Aviv is still running. The prime minister is still underground. The streets around the site of the claimed strike are still sealed, and the question of what a Kheibar Shekan hit within the Kirya perimeter actually damaged remains unanswered. That is where this story is right now. Not at its end, not even close to it. If you want to understand what comes next in this war, the decisions being made at command level on both sides, subscribe and stay close. The next several days will be significant. Drop your read on this in the comments below.